Hello. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Michael O'Rourke, and I am going to be talking about a playbook for what I would previously call middleware protocols, but now I think is officially DPIN. So to move forward with this talk, what am I talking about? I'm going to be mostly focusing on the economic perspective on these kind of middleware protocols. And I'm going to be leaning heavily on the lessons learned in founding and launching Pocket Network. Some of the key takeaways and kind of the arc of the talk is really going to be talking about what's it mean to launch your protocol, what's it mean to grow your protocol, and then what's it mean to get to sustainability. A little bit about me. I'm co-founder of Pocket Network. I'm the CEO of Grove Incorporated, formerly known as Pocket Network Inc. I am a Florida man. I studied international studies in college and eventually learned to code before founding Pocket and was an iOS engineer for a few years. Real quick to talk about what is Pocket Network solving. So the key thing here is the RPC trilemma. Hat tip to Olshansky for coining this. But it's really about every middleware DPIN protocol is effectively solving the same problem here. We all want to kind of find the middle between reliability, performance, and cost effectiveness. And as an RPC provider, right, we want to make sure that we meet the quality of service, SLAs, and everything while having the cheapest and fastest service possible. And why listen to us? We've got pretty serious experience in terms of theory and practice. We've overcome some pretty serious technical, tokenomic, and social hurdles online. And we are the creators of the first decentralized RPC network. We've been online on mainnet for 3 years. We just had a protocol upgrade last week that we coordinated over 1,000 validators to upgrade the protocol. We peaked at about 2 billion daily relays, and we've served over 700 billion relays. So while this isn't Web 2 scale, I think it's meaningful enough scale to kind of hopefully impart some of our lessons. So what's it mean to launch your protocol? As this talk goes on, you'll see this kind of solar punk imagery, and that's just kind of to highlight the optimistic nature of what I think we're building. I really think that we have the opportunity to create new institutions and through these protocols. So that's kind of why I like to have this kind of imagery behind it. So launching a blockchain is really hard. This isn't a not to knock Web 2 SaaS services, but these have been really tried and true for the last 20 years. So not only do you have to deal with the front end to back end, your infrastructure, DevOps team, business development, you also have to build a protocol. You also have to deal with the community. In most cases, you have a DAO. You have to design some tokenomics, and honestly, if you're in infrastructure, marketing is really hard in this space. So what I'm hoping to do is, since we've seen so many innovations on the tooling to actually be able to launch these protocols with Comet BFT, with rollups, with Arbitrum, Optimism, and these different protocols, what I want to do is really kind of frame how you can think about launching these things in a practical way and give you at least kind of a path forward. But first, I kind of want to frame how I think about blockchains. If you draw a triangle between governments, religions, and corporations, blockchains sit right in the middle. These are really kind of the first and only 3 major human coordination mechanisms that we've seen in the last 6,000 or so years. And that's why I think this is such a really exciting time, because blockchains are really the first internet-native human coordination mechanism. So when we talk about tokens and these sorts of things, the important thing here is that we're really coordinating people across the internet without knowing who they are, where they're from, and I think that's just incredibly powerful. So what do you have to think about when you're launching your protocol? You've got the supply side that you have to they have to think about, so you have to bootstrap the supply side. I think it's really important to just experiment and iterate. I'm a big fan of don't let the perfect be the enemy of good. That said, you obviously want your protocol to be incredibly secure, and you don't want to deal with any major hacks or anything like that. We think about just one major KPI. Obviously, the simplest is the simpler the better. In our case, it is requests going on the network, or relays, as we call them. When we think about the demand, the founding team should generally be the people driving the demand of the product, at least initially, because generally, in our experience, garnering the supply side is a little bit easier. Also, when you think about capital markets, things you have to think about things like listing your token and what are the economics of the token and whether you're on EVM or you're on IBC or are you on an island. And particularly when it comes to the economics, you don't want to overcomplicate your design of your token. As a heads up, I will be talking a little bit about token price, but this is purely in the context of having an actual sustainable protocol that you want to actually exist for over 100 years. But to talk a little bit about economics, I really think that we overcomplicate our designs a lot. This is not very different from video game design. If you've ever played any MMORPGs, Ultima Online was the largest in the 90s. And in fact, they wrote a paper about the economics of their MMORPG. And this is a picture on the right of their actual economic system. And at the end of the day, all you really need to think about is what's creating the token and what are the sinks for the token, right? So in Pocket's use case, to be a node, you have to buy and stake Pocket to have the right to do work. That's great because in a permissionless system, now the protocol can actually slash you or punish you if you're not adhering to the rules of the protocol itself. In terms of our faucet for the protocol, it's every time a request is created, Pocket is also created once that is verified by the protocol. And you can think about how these things can evolve. For example, you can think about DeFi and various lend-borrow desks and these sorts of things as different kinds of sinks for your token. And at the end of the day, what you really want is an equilibrium. Do you have the amount of Pocket, in our case, Pocket being emitted, equivalent to the amount being burned or being sunk into the system? So you have kind of permanent burn, and then you have things like staking and crypto-economic designs. But fundamentally, I actually don't think it's that complicated as long as you really think about kind of the outcome of what you want your token to coordinate, right? And I think that's really, really important to think about. I'm a big fan of how placeholder capital frames kind of decentralized networks. When you're launching your protocol, you really kind of have 4 vectors of decentralization: capital markets, governance, supply, and demand. I'm not talking too much about Pocket's governance in this talk, but we went full decentralization on our supply and governance side of the protocol. Whereas on the demand and capital markets, for us, was a big fat 0. That's because we had to learn what it looks like to have world-class quality of service on a network of people that are running nodes that have all very different setups, right? So in our supply side, we had permissionless supply. Our governance model is 1 person, 1 vote. As long as you participate in the protocol, you can actually claim your vote in a bit of a game. But up until relatively recently, Grove has been the only gateway on top of the network. And it's taken some time to get our capital markets mature. So these are things like, exchanges, DeFi, lend borrow. Like there's a whole ecosystem of capital markets that I think is actually quite critical for tokens, despite honestly being a product person and really wanting to focus mostly on the product. So we're evolving a little bit. You've launched it. Now you're starting to think about growing your protocol. So let's look a little bit about. Let's see what that looks like. So you're starting to get traction on your main KPI. In our case, that's relays. Just to give a little story, the first year of Pocket was really just fixing things. We were maybe doing 2 million requests a day for the first few months. And we actually had one of our first users 5x that traffic effectively overnight. And that was actually our first chain halt. We call that fondly the dark blocks phase of Pocket. But what I mean is really focus on your main KPI. It's inevitable that things will break. We are not near Web 2 scale where you're seeing trillions and trillions of requests every day. And as apps start to come on the market, it's going to continue to push the infrastructure. And then we have to learn to figure out how to really improve it to be able to maintain that scale. As product people, it's really important to see, are people actually paying for your product? Is your token actually serving a real use case? And within that context, it's really important to see, to think about kind of the right incentives. I think a lot about how people launch their tokens and their networks. And really, if you want these things to last, you really can't front load incentives. You really want people to continually earn and see opportunity over the course of 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years. And we kind of don't see much of that these days. The other things are, how is your supply and demand scaling? It's always going to be a push and pull, but as I'll talk about in a moment, you'll see how an extreme version of one side or the other can impact your protocol. And of course, down the line, you want to think about decentralizing supply and demand. When you're bootstrapping your ecosystem, I think generally, if you're really focused on building a technical community and people who really care about your vision, friction is good. So just to give you an example, we launched our protocol in July of 2020. We weren't listed until, I believe it was January 2023 on proper exchanges, or I'm sorry, 22, forgive me. And for the first year or so of Pocket being live, you could only buy Pocket through a Telegram OTC. And this is very different from buying something on Uniswap. There was a lot of trust involved. Luckily, we were introduced to some good people, and some of our own investors just decided to help out there. But what was really interesting about this, and that has actually impacted our community to this day, is that friction to be able to trust this Telegram OTC through non-traditional channels really made it such that when people came across Pocket, they had to really care about the product and the project to really kind of take that leap and actually participate in the network. And that's actually formed the foundation of our community until today, and I think is really something that has been a really strong impact for us since we've launched. So let's talk about unsustainable economics. So Pocket has a dynamic inflation. It's purely based on the traffic going through the network. I've got a picture up here at the top of that inflation, and at the bottom I've got a picture of the price of Pocket. So from 21 to 22, we grew from about 10 million requests a day to over 1 billion requests a day. And this was all providing free infrastructure. This resulted in a incredible inflation of the network. I think we were like over 1,000% a year at one point. And this created a really kind of perverted dynamic because we actually had a very supply-led growth in the adoption of the protocol and the token. So you can see here kind of the Pocket price. It maps time-wise, even though the pictures aren't exactly mapped. You'll see our kind of token price going up because people were just kind of printing money. Actually, it was kind of ridiculous. And everyone was also running on the cloud, which is also not very good because kind of that doesn't really align with kind of this RPC trilemma that I mentioned before. So you can see here around January of 22, January to April 22, you'll start to see the emissions start to go down, and that's because the Pocket DAO decided, okay, this is crazy. We need to cut down inflation significantly. And that resulted in a very reflexive cycle for our network. And this actually ended up creating a ton of pain for a couple of reasons, but also there's some silver linings too. So markets will adjust. One of the things that I'm most fascinated by is how the Pocket infrastructure market has actually really been dynamic. So when people were printing money, no one cared, they were on the cloud. But over the next 12 to 18 months, everyone moved to bare metal, and people started buying their own servers and actually getting the most efficient setups they possibly could, which I think is really, really fascinating. But when we talk about an imbalance of supply and demand, we had a massive over-provisioning of infrastructure, not matching the amount of traffic that was being sent to the network, much less paid traffic, because at the time, this was all free, and we were just trying to bootstrap it to prove that this could work at scale. In hindsight, I think one of the key learning lessons that I had was we should probably be much more aggressive about adjustments. I think we should get our protocols used to shocks to the system early on, because I think that really helps our protocols be kind of anti-fragile in this respect. We ended up kind of slowly lowering inflation, which caused a slow bleed. And in hindsight, if we had just kind of cut inflation from 100% to 5%, I think we would have been much more healthy at the end of the day. But that's in hindsight. So just a couple key learnings from this story. Supply is easier than demand. I think you should get your community used to shocks to the system early on. I think we see this just in crypto cycles over the last however many years. It's every 3 or 4 years. We see highs and lows and everything in between. I think being internet native, we're better equipped to actually handle these sorts of things. Supply-led growth is obviously not sustainable. You want a real balance on demand versus supply. The market will become more efficient. DeFi rails would have helped us significantly. We had lots of node runners having to sell their POCT because they were running full archival nodes on AWS, and things like being able to lend POCT, lend USDC and to pay your server bills and be able to pay that back in like your POCT emissions would have helped a lot, for example. And also a committed community will contribute and push a protocol forward. The last 18 months was a lot of pain for the network. And we've had some people, most of the core community has actually stuck around. We've had some consolidation within the supply side network, but at the end of the day, people who really care about it will stick around, which I think has been one of the coolest things to see over the last 18 months. Cool, so I only have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to talk about getting sustainability. So this is what the future looks like. How do we get to the sustainable kind of future that we want? So I have two views. I have a view on how these things should grow on the demand side. Generally, we see them being either foundation-led or corporation for-profit-led. In our case, Grove is a for-profit-led in terms of how we are thinking about decentralizing demand. But for example, Arweave, I believe, is a foundation-led, and you can kind of think about how these different protocols do this, right? I believe that in our case, by building out the tooling and building out the business on top of the protocol, by fundamentally forcing ourselves to have to turn a profit, we can build the best tooling for the right ecosystems for the markets that we're trying to capture, right? Whereas I think it's a different scenario if you have a foundation kind of giving grants to different participants in your ecosystem. And one thing that we've really thought about is how do we create a moat in an open source network when in about 6 months or so we're going to be launching the new version of the protocol which allows us to have permissionless gateways, which is really exciting for us. Like I said before, we've really been the only gateway on top of the network until relatively recently. And last year we really spent thinking about what does a moat as a for-profit company look like in a decentralized network. And also, when I think about decentralization, I think at the end of the day, it depends on how big your market is, and that'll allow for how many kind of niche solutions can actually be built and serving different customers. I think being in the infrastructure space, there's effectively an infinite number of permutations that Web3 developers need, which means that I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to build different types of gateways within our ecosystem. And also, I think it's just really important to build really easily runnable software. To just talk a little bit about Grove's kind of business model within this context. We've spent the last 18 months just building an incredible stack that allows for people to access the 50+ blockchains that we have at sub 150 millisecond latency. What we want to do is really kind of go towards this open core model. Actually, if you look up Open Core Ventures, I think they've got some really good blog posts on like what this means. But generally, what we plan on doing is opening up our own core APIs for our core product, the portal, and we want to be able to enable as many other people to build these gateways as possible. We did this first rather than open sourcing kind of the core Pocket logic, because pragmatically we wanted to be able to get to market sooner, and with the launch of the new version of Pocket, Shannon, we want to be able to enable as many different types of services as possible. But over time, we're going to end up open sourcing our core Pocket logic, which means anyone will be able to run their own sovereign gateway. And for our business, we see our kind of opportunity as being able to sell into these sovereign gateways through these additional APIs that we've gotten really good at serving. So things like real-time data, notifications, and this sort of thing. So you can kind of think of kind of WordPress plugins or some mix of like Shopify and this sort of thing. So at the end of the day, every middleware protocol literally has the same challenges. You want to launch, you want to fix a lot of shit, you want to incentivize supply and figure out what your KPI is, in our case, quality of service, and relays. You want to keep fixing shit, it's going to keep breaking. You want to mature your capital markets, and you kind of want to rein in supply-led growth, like I said in hindsight. And as your market grows, you want to keep fixing shit. And then you want to build out the open source infrastructure to enable kind of this demand side market to flourish. And what I mean by that is I think at the end of the day, DPIN and middleware projects are really enabling opportunity for entrepreneurs, and that's really dictated by the size of your market at the end of the day, and I think that's really how we should think about this. I think we are in a special position as kind of broadly middleware and DPIN because we were actually doing the really hard work of actually touching the real world in some way, whether that be through AI, infrastructure, storage, and these sorts of things. I think we have a big opportunity to actually have real Web 2 use cases. And by enabling as much opportunity for as many people as possible, you'll actually have an incredibly strong community that can withstand incredible shocks to the system and token up or down or whatever it might be in the future. So I got to end my presentation now, so thank you for your time. And yeah, thanks everyone.